Hi, everyone. My name is Dana Habeeb, and I'm in the Department of Informatics and part of the Pro Health track. My work really looks at how the built environment impacts individuals' health and community health. I have a specific focus at looking at trying to capture data at the local level as well as design implementation at the local level. My work has a specific focus on extreme heat events and climate change to understand how heat exposures increases a person's vulnerability to heat mortality. But I also look at air quality impacts as well as the urban form of the built environment and how that can impact health and community health. Extreme heat is a very important public health issue. More people in the United States die to extreme heat events than any other natural disaster. We see that individuals and residents in urban areas are more vulnerable to extreme heat because of what's known as the urban heat-on effect. We see that temperatures in cities are higher than the rural areas. We see that temperatures in cities are actually increasing at a faster pace than rural areas. And we actually see when looking at heat wave trends in large US cities across the United States, that heat wave trends are increasing across the board. And that no matter where US cities are located, they need to be planning for extreme heat events. When understanding the exposure to extreme heat, it's important that we understand that heat changes dramatically within the urban environment. So it's important for us to be able to categorize and document how this temperature varies in the built form by categorizing and creating urban typologies and associating that with temperature trends. It's also important to try to understand different types of urban implementations and local implementations we can do to try to reduce exposures in the built environment. And green infrastructure is one of those important mechanisms that we can actually implement in cities to actually reduce exposure levels. Also, it's important, this is very important for informatics, that we actually start pushing the data acquisition towards the local level. We see that a lot of environmental characteristics are captured at regional scales, but that we see these vary dramatically within cities, not just between cities. And so looking at doing censored deployments throughout cities in order to really capture how temperatures vary within the built environment is very important for an individual to really understand their exposure to health. I'm interested in linking this type of information to mobile technology and as well as wearable technology in order to try to inform individuals of their heat exposures as well as their heat vulnerability. It's important also that we look at sensor deployment in a way to not just give information to individuals, but also to communities and governments to understand the performance of green infrastructure. If green infrastructure is being used as a mechanism to reduce an individual's vulnerability to extreme heat, we need to have more work in actually capturing that performance of green infrastructure. So looking at sensor deployments of using soil moisture sensors as well as evapotranspiration sensors in a way to really capture whether green infrastructure is performing in the ways during extreme heat events as we hope them to be performing at a time when individuals and city residents need that help the most. Air quality is also a very important issue with regard to urban areas. We see that air quality is still a problem in cities and that people with current conditions such as respiratory and cardiovascular disease have higher rates of vulnerability as well as the elderly and the young. And we see a huge exposure due to the transportation sector. But just similar as temperature data acquisition, this air quality is captured at the regional level as well. And we see, especially with issues of particulate matter, that we see a large spatial distribution with regard to air quality and air pollutant exposures at the local level. And so this is an area that is very important for informatics to be pushing in with regard to sensor deployments and looking at how we can actually integrate reliable sensor technology into urban environments to better assess the vulnerability of individual and communities, and also to be able to give that information to individuals and communities to empower them to make change at the individual and at the community level. I'm also interested in looking at how to combine all these together: air quality, extreme heat, urban form, and looking at pre-existing conditions of individuals such as diabetes and cardiovascular and respiratory disease to understand how that exposure to different built environment conditions really does impact an individual and community's health. Thank you.